Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and when we last left McClernand, he was outside of Vicksburg, having captured significant ground in an attack, but without support, he had to withdraw. On June 4th, McClernand sent a letter to Grant asking him to clear up rumors and allegations that he and others, mostly West Pointers, were holding him back from getting the accolades he deserved. He also wanted Grant to issue a declaration addressing the rumor that McClernand was under arrest. Grant simply ignored the request. On June 18th, the battle between Grant and McClernand came to a climax. At 2 a.m., one of Grant's staff came to McClernand's headquarters and asked that the general be awakened. After a few moments, the staff officer was directed into a room where McClernand sat in full uniform with his sword on the table in front of him. The staff member gave McClernand a sealed envelope. The general read it. It was Special Orders number 164. After reading it, McClernand stated, "Well, sir, I am relieved. By God, sir, we are both relieved." The staff member then informed the former commander that Major General Edward Ord would immediately take command and that McClernand was to return home to Illinois and await word from the War Department. The next day, Grant informed Halleck of McClernand getting relieved and cited McClernand's congratulatory letter as the reason why. Grant would write to another that the change is better than 10,000 reinforcements. McClernand's dismissal from the Army came with varied opinions. Of course, some of his men loved him, but even with them, he had seemed to want glory more than simply victory. However, it was his interactions with the higher command of the Army of the Tennessee that ruffled the most feathers. Most saw him as egotistical and seeking notoriety, which caused consternation within the Army. Although he won battles and helped spearhead the Army on the Vicksburg campaign, his attempts to assert his role in the papers and to political officials drew ire from the other corps and division commanders, as well as the Army commander. By June 23rd, McClernand arrived in Illinois, and he sent off telegrams and letters to Abraham Lincoln, hoping to be reinstated. In the letter, he informed the president that a conspiracy to deny him the credit he deserved had been ripped from him by West Pointers, and that for his adjutant's failure to send Grant a copy of the congratulatory letter, he had been relieved. Lincoln would not accept the pleading of McClernand. When Grant sent his report of the campaign in July, as one historian stated, he castigated McClernand for his performance at Port Gibson, Champion Hill, and Vicksburg. With the capture of Vicksburg, Grant rose to a great opinion in many Northerners' minds and the president's. McClernand would be fighting a steep uphill battle if he wanted to save his reputation. McClernand tried many ways to get back into the Union ranks. He petitioned the president and his entire cabinet in one form or another to be reinstated. McClernand even tried to conspire with Postmaster General Montgomery Blair to oust Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, but Blair wanted nothing to do with the matter. On August 12th, Lincoln responded to McClernand. He basically stated that he could not reinstate McClernand without forcing the removal of Grant as commander, plus he had no command to offer McClernand. This was not an easy choice for Lincoln. He stressed over the McClernand-Grant affair, but would not give in to McClernand's demands. Lincoln told the Illinois politician that no court of inquiry would be called because it would take too many good generals out of the field, but if a moment arose where they could safely be spared from the front line, he would hold that court of inquiry. McClernand also corresponded with numerous former subordinates, assembling evidence that his men had indeed made it to the rebel works at Vicksburg and captured some of their fortifications. This way, he would challenge Grant's accusations about false reports and attempt to correct the misinformation. By October, he also filled 19 pages with a defense of his ability as a commander and challenges against the abilities of Grant. In part, it read, "How far General Grant is indebted to the forbearance of officers under his command for his retention in the public service so long, I will not undertake to state unless he should challenge it. Neither will I undertake to show that he is indebted to the good conduct of officers and men of his command for the series of successes that have gained him applause rather than to his own merit as a commander, unless he should challenge it too." Nothing was coming of his allegations against Grant, but McClernand persisted, and political developments seems to have led Lincoln to put him back into command. On the domestic side of politics, Lincoln feared losing the 1864 presidential election. especially if he could not garner enough votes in Illinois. In his home state, McClernand still possessed a lot of political power, and it seems as though this was a major factor in putting McClernand back in command. After the fall of Vicksburg, McClernand's 13th Corps was reassigned to Louisiana and Texas, under the command of Nathaniel Banks, who sent some of those troops on an invasion of Texas, all the way to Brownsville in response to France putting troops in Mexico City. McClernand was elated to hear the news of him taking command of the 13th Corps again, and left Illinois on February 2nd, arriving in New Orleans on February 15th. On February 23rd, McClernand officially took command of the 13th Corps by replacing General Ord. By March, he traveled to southern Texas, where he was to control part of the state's coast and its frontier with only a small portion of his 13th Corps. 2 divisions had been sent to assist Banks on the Red River campaign. McClernand engaged in securing communications through his jurisdiction and fortifying pivotal locations. One of the most important of those locations was Brownsville because of its proximity to Mexico. Union scouts reported that Confederate officials were still in the area and were trading cotton with Mexico across the border. When McClernand visited Brownsville in April, he met with Juan Cartina, the Governor General of the state which bordered Texas across from Brownsville. Cortina was known as a cattle rustler, bank robber, extortionist, and murderer. He killed the bandit ruler of the area in 1863 and declared himself governor and did business with both the United States and the Confederacy. McClernand sent a stern letter to Cortina insisting that he stop trading with Confederates. Cortina allegedly sent the letter to the President Benito Juarez. Although not wholly taken in by Cortina, McClernand believed that the Governor General would side with the Union if given the choice. Around the same time that he was conversing with Cortina, Banks sent him an order instructing him to bring some of his garrisoned infantry to New Orleans, then proceed up to Alexandria. Banks had been defeated at Mansfield and Pleasant Hill and wanted McClernand to take command of the 13th Corps on the expedition. At Alexandria, the Union forces were in a dangerous situation. Porter's gunboats were trapped by shallow water, and Banks resolved to entrench around Alexandria. In late April, McClernand got malaria, and on May 1st, he put Brigadier General Michael Lawler in command of his corps while he recovered. He would not have a speedy recovery. McClernand had to return to Illinois. His corps would be divided up throughout the department. Upon returning to his home state on leave of absence, he recovered sufficiently enough that by July he petitioned to be given an independent command along the Mississippi River from Memphis to New Orleans. However, he would not hear back from Washington. He remained in a limbo state awaiting orders. In the fall, he campaigned for presidential candidate George McClellan against Abraham Lincoln, and on November 23, 1864, he submitted his resignation from the Army. He cited his ability to do more for the war effort as a civilian than as an unused general. He would write, "The personal relations borne towards me by officers in the military service who are my superiors in rank and influence render my future usefulness in my military capacity contingent and uncertain. My retirement from the military service would relieve both them and me from any further embarrassment growing out of these actions." When Lincoln was assassinated, the president's body left on a train from Washington, D.C. on April 21st, with McClernand aboard, along with Richard Yates. They would accompany the body all the way to Springfield, and during the funeral process, McClernand would lead a division. At the funeral, it was McClernand who delivered the eulogy, stressing the ability of the Union to come back together. He also declared his faith in the new president, Andrew Johnson, to lead the country. With the war coming to a close, McClernand would return to his political and domestic life in Illinois, raising his children and still defending his reputation.